Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Dr. Ash Enrici from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and I'm honored to be moderating this conversation. There's a saying with murky origins that's been on my mind lately. It's, "May you live in interesting times." I first encountered these words in 2019 when they served as the theme for the Venice Biennale, and they've stuck with me since. At first hearing, it kind of sounds like a blessing or something nice you might say to somebody, like who wouldn't want to live in interesting times? But there's actually a subtle irony there and an edge that becomes more clear the longer you sit with the saying. After all, interesting times are often the most challenging to live through. And we are certainly living in interesting times right now. We face profound challenges, changing climate, threatened ecosystems, deepening inequality, democratic instability in some parts of the world, and escalating conflicts around the globe. But it's precisely in moments like these, moments of upheaval and that are interesting, that transformative change becomes possible. And that's what makes today's conversation so exciting. Our speakers aren't just observers, they're on the front lines of change, rolling up their sleeves and doing the work. Their stories remind us that hope isn't just wishful thinking, it's built day by day through concrete actions and collective effort. And so it's my privilege to introduce today's speakers, each of whom brings invaluable expertise and perspective to our talk today. Atosa Saltani is the Director of Global Strategy for the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative, an alliance of 30 indigenous nations in Ecuador and Peru working to permanently protect 86 million acres of rainforest, one of the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth. Yash Ranga is the Director of Partnerships and Innovation at Pixera Global, a community-driven nonprofit accelerating systemic change through multi-stakeholder partnerships. And John Mbungwa is the Community Officer and Research and Data Analyst at the Green Generation Initiative. We had originally planned to be joined by Elizabeth Wathuti, the founder of the initiative, but due to a scheduling conflict, we're lucky to have John stepping in today. The Green Generation Initiative is one of the fastest growing youth-led climate organizations in Africa, driving change in climate policy, biodiversity restoration, and youth movement building. We're incredibly fortunate to have these leaders with us today, and I look forward to an engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Before we begin, though, I'd like to just quickly take a moment to share the structure of today's session. Each of our distinguished speakers will first have an opportunity to share their work with you. Then we'll move into a panel discussion where we'll explore the connections and insights that emerge from their different perspectives. We'll conclude with a Q&A session where you'll have the chance to engage directly with our speakers. We encourage you to actively participate by using the Q&A function here on Zoom. If you have a question for our speakers, please type it into the Q&A box at any time. We'll be monitoring your questions and we'll do our best to address as many as possible during the Q&A session. Your engagement is important to us, and we look forward to an insightful and meaningful discussion. So with that, let's get started, and I'll first hand it over to Atosa to tell us about her work.
Thank you so much, Ash, and the entire team. It's such an honor to be here with you guys today, and thanks for all of the listeners and people who are on the Zoom call. I just want to congratulate you for being involved in philanthropy, which is the love of life, love of humanity. My work has been for 3 decades in the Amazon basin, working alongside Indigenous peoples to protect the rainforest and to support Indigenous peoples' collective rights, rights to land, rights to their livelihoods, rights to their culture and lifeways. I also had a brief stint in philanthropy as a board member of the Christensen Fund, a foundation, a philanthropic organization that supports the stewards of biocultural diversity. I've spent time as an activist confronting basically extractive industries. I've also helped start an organization called Amazon Watch, which continues to do great work in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. But really today I'm here representing the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance. For the last 7 years, we have built a collective effort among the indigenous nations of the Ecuadorian Peruvian Amazon and the headwaters of the Amazon basin, where some of the most biodiverse place on Earth has been identified as one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. it's also the headwaters of the Amazon. So what happens there has rippling effects all the way down throughout the basin. It's an area where I started working over 20 some years ago. And what I can tell you is that it's an area that is both incredibly diverse culturally and also biologically. It's an area that's threatened by extractive industries. And what we're learning is that, really, these are complex issues and that they require in sort of unparalleled collaboration. And that's one of the messages for you all today, is that ultimately it's about complex issues that no one set of people or organizations can solve, and requires trust, requires processes, requires long-term investments to really advance the protection of and transform the dynamics that are destroying this area and transform this region to a region that's a model for the world. So it's an honor to be with you guys today. Really my thought about philanthropy has been that Indigenous peoples play an outsized role in the conservation of forests and biodiversity and protection of, solutions for climate action. Something like 5% of the world's population are considered Indigenous, and yet something like more than half of the world's intact forests and most of the world's biodiversity is on Indigenous territories. And yet you can, one of the things that I was shocked about when I was at the Christensen Fund is that less than 1%, in fact, less than, not even half of 1% of philanthropic investments make it to the Indigenous territory organizations, much less in the territories. So one of the big challenges is to overcome the barrier that philanthropy has in seeing and recognizing the outsized role Indigenous peoples play in these solutions, and finding ways to build trust and responsible philanthropy to be able to support Indigenous people's own solutions. So that's what I get to do now, is helping to basically build trust, build coalition, and help Indigenous peoples identify their life plans, their plans for their culture, landscape, economy, well-being, and bringing that together in a way that philanthropy can say yes, and to basically build these trust allyship over time. So I'll stop there. I know we're going to get into discussions, but this, will we have, what's important about the Amazon also before I pass it on, is that we are at a tipping point of no return in the Amazon system. People have heard the Amazon called the lungs of the earth, as is the Congo, for example. The Amazon's also the heart of the hydrological climatic system of the biosphere, the way the Amazon generates atmospheric rivers that drive rainfall across the planet. And we really are seeing the collapse of that system. And we are very much at a threshold where the next 5 to 10 years will make a huge difference for the next 1,000 years in terms of whether the Amazon tips and becomes a savanna or continues to be a rain machine for the planet. And that's why it's so urgent that we take on these issues at this moment and find ways to direct support to the front lines, to the solutions that have longevity. Thank you for. I'll stop there and pass it on to my fellow speakers.
Thank you, Atosa. That was wonderful. Yash, would you go next, please, and tell us about your work?
Thank you, Ash, and thank you, Atosa, for that inspiring and reminding us that, who we are and what should we be conscious about with where we are heading towards as humanity and as planet. So I think it's such a perfect timing for us. So thank you for that kickoff for us. And Ash, again, welcome and thank you very much for having us here. And I really appreciate everybody's time taking out their schedules to be part of this conversation. So I would really like to start with a quick anecdote of how it started and what made me realize who I am and what I'm doing today. So basically started as any other young aspiring Indian just to found a career in tech and finding the solutions to the consumer needs by AI and machine learning and in Silicon Valley. But somehow at a right point of time in my career, I got an epiphany and I realized that in spite of spending that time in tech, I was not made to work with and for machines. And the response for me was then what I'm supposed to do. And what I felt is I am really made to work with and for human beings. And I think that just initiated my journey to figure out how can my skill sets can be of can be of resource to solving the world's most pressing problems. And I think it's been 15 years now. I have been working with different organizations to scale social impact, to invest in the untapped potential of the indigenous wisdom and bring that to the world in form of different supply chains, climate scale, climate solutions. So more towards how do we bring actionable programming on the ground. So I started my career in the impact space with a social impact organization in India called Jaipur Rugs that works with 40,000 women artisans from indigenous community and connect them to the global market so that we can sustain and appreciate the 2,500-year-old dying art forms. That's how we invest in the culture, but we also preserve the identity from where the crafts come from. And while I've been working on that, I just again got a realization that world is grappling through the growing social, cultural, economic challenges we face as humanity. And I need to be focused on large systemic issues. So that's how my current role at Pixara Global, which is a systems change organization, as Ash mentioned. So my current role is to really bring the best of public, private, and social sector perspectives, skill sets, and resources to really dismantle the structural inequalities and champion community-led solutions. So how we do that is a very interesting approach of looking at the systems change from the lens of collaboration. And we will talk more about why collaboration is important more than ever in the time in the world that we are witnessing together as humanity, because it's such a sensitive time that it's only groundbreaking partnerships, innovative approach of bringing the best from different sectors can actually help us achieve the urgency that we all need to be working at to address not only just the climate challenge, but again, a lot of social, cultural, and economic challenges with these growing uncertainties in our world. So I really look forward for a very engaging discussion with the fellow panelists, and again, love to hear perspective, inputs, and questions from our audience so that we can enrich ourselves too while we are sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yash. Thank you very much. John?
Thank you, the panelists and the attendees that we have today. My name is John Bogwa. I'm from the Green Generation Initiative. This is a youth-led organization that was started in 2016. Our focus is solution-based and nature-based solution for nature. And I came to learn of this or to be involved in this because I have a background in, I was born and raised in Kenya, in the foots of the Aberdare Ridges, and I grew up seeing the ecosystem balance, the flora and fauna growing so well and so beautiful, the rivers, the streams, the clean air. And I was brought up by parents who were into the tree nurseries, and they used to develop fruit seedlings, tree seedlings, and all these kind of things. So at a young age, I came to see the people who are not only concerned in the cutting of trees, but they were concerned in the growing of the trees and giving them out and selling to the communities for them to do reforestation. And this instilled a virtue that I never learned. I developed it at a very young age, but I saw that virtue of growing the trees at a young age. And I came to join the Green Generation Initiative, and that's where we have been doing a lot of these community-led activities that are focused on the young people, because you realize that in Africa, the biggest population is the young generation. Actually, if you look at the statistics, I have a statistics background, so I love data. You'll see that the population below 25 years in Africa is around 40%. So that's quite almost half of the population that is in Africa. And a solution that is brought that focuses on mentoring that population to be the next ambassadors of climate change, to be the next ambassadors of the development of ecosystem is something that we as the Green Generation Initiative are always more than willing to be involved in. And we love it because when you go to the children, when you go to the young people, when you go to the youth, both in Kenya and in Africa and in the global spaces, you come to learn people who have that factor and who have that heart of taking care of Mother Nature installed in them. And one of the reading motivation in Green Generation is somebody who was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in Kenya, who was called Professor Wangari Maathai. And she had a quote that says that nature sometimes can be very unforgiving. That if we train the people to not take care of nature, nature will in turn revenge to us through the things that we are seeing here, the heat waves, the droughts, the lack of water, the drying up of these things. So we are focused on being involved in policy advocacy. We are focused in being involved in everything that factors this generation that we are having and even the next generation. That's why as the Green Generation Initiative, we are a youth-led organization, and we focus in mentoring the next generation to ensure that even when we are long gone, we have a generation that will take care of nature. And that has been very vital in our life. We have seen that in the schools. We are mostly involved in the schools. The young kids, we see that we train the young kids on how to take care of the polypods even after they plant the seedlings. We train even the young population how to be the ambassadors that do the work that is supposed to be taken care of. And when we do that, we see them asking their fellow students question, why are you doing this? Because that factor and that culture has been inculcated into their system. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today, focusing on all the population, especially the young generation, learning some of the challenges and the solution that we are facing as a group in Africa and even beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So now we can move on to the panel section of our webinar, and I'm excited to hear more about the work that you all are doing. So thank you so much for sharing that, and let's keep talking. So Atosa, I'd like to start with a few questions for you, if that's all right. My first is that for you as the Director of Global Strategy for the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, your work highlights Indigenous stewardship of some of the world's most vital rainforests and ecosystems. Could you share more about how the relationship between Indigenous peoples and the land informs the Alliance's approach to forest protection and climate action?
Sure. I'm going to start maybe by just showing you a quick slide of where we're doing this with this work here, if I can. I had it earlier. So basically, this is an area of the Amazon where for 30 plus years, Indigenous peoples have already been organizing. They have been organizing for land rights, for title to their ancestral lands. This is a landscape that's primarily Indigenous peoples' territories. And the good thing about the work we're doing in Ecuador is that it's at a nexus of a country that recognizes the rights of nature, that recognizes the rights of Indigenous people to prior consultation, that recognize the rights of Indigenous collective rights and land rights of Indigenous people. So we are already in a place where there are headwinds in the work that we're doing. Now, Indigenous peoples of this part of the Amazon consider themselves dream cultures. A lot of their daily actions are in harmony and reverence and in service to a living forest perspective. You know, the idea that the forest is alive, that the rivers have spirit, that there's visible and invisible beings in the forest, that their ancestors are around them, informing them, guiding them, and that future generations that are yet to be born are part of who informs them through their dreams, through their ceremonies, through their connection with plants, through their connection with the spirit of the waterfall and the ancient trees. They are in constant service and receiving mandates as being forest guardians, as being seeing themselves in basically reciprocity and in service to future generations. And that ethic, it's not just an ethic, it's a paradigm, it's a worldview that informs everything we do. So when we began, there was actually philanthropy had and NGOs in this landscape hadn't always been positive. They had been very much top down, and many times there a lot of competition among Indigenous nations who were, shared the same rivers. If a dam is built upstream or downstream, if the oil project's built upstream, affects the whole of the basin. So what we saw was that, there were a lot of huge threats, and the idea that you have to compete and be solely in organizations that compete and generate results on your own is something that came from the colonial mindset. We really had to listen deeply and see that the emergence is that there's interconnectedness, that everything is connected, that the system, the integrity of the bioregion, the integrity of the river basin is dependent on the collective actions of all and a shared vision. So there needed to be a shared vision. There needed to be a collaboration. So the process began of saying, rather than compete, why don't we begin to work together? And there was already historical alliances that we built on. So Indigenous people came together. They created a shared vision, a bioregional plan for the permanent protection of these headwaters, which I'm going to show you in just, here it is. Just to share this one slide that shows you, this is the Napo and the Pastasa river basins that begin in the glaciers in the Amazon, and basically the rivers run through from Ecuador into Peru. The indigenous peoples were separated by a war for 40 years, but they were the same nations across both borders. So when we began the process of alliance building, it was just incredible because many of these communities wanted to reunite their nations across the political boundary. And they started saying that the political boundary was irrelevant to the well-being of the territory, that it was really the cultural boundaries and the ecological boundaries that mattered, around indigenous territories and river basins. And so a bioregional plan was created. It took us about 4 years of a participatory process of bringing shared vision together, looking at the axes of action, looking at where we can advance land rights, where we can stop destruction by extractive industries, where we can do remediation and restoration, where are priorities for conservation and corridors. And all of that has began a process of really experimenting and piloting and working to scale the solutions that are already in the ground. And it took a lot of deep listening. And this area of the Amazon not only has, oil reserves that, if drilled, would have huge consequences for emissions, but they also have the most biodiverse forests that would have huge implications. And also the health of the whole Amazon River basin depends on the headwaters. So it's also a metaphor for how we inform our solutions. And given the political landscape and the fact that our democracy is captured and our economic systems are life blind, what we see is the bioregional approach, the approach that Indigenous peoples have begun to map their entire watersheds and said we need action at the level, scale of the landscape that is our bioregion, is where we can see real results. So I think one of the messages for us is that, bioregional action encourages participatory, democratic, shared vision, collaborative efforts that bring people together despite political headwinds that often have to do with unfriendly governments, and that we really need to look at headwaters also as a metaphor of where we have to go to take to shift paradigm, that this space, for example, the headwaters of the Amazon, is a space for life, not for extraction, not for destruction. It's a space for shared, protection of biodiversity and cultural diversity. So we have to like shift mindsets, and we also have to look at systemic solutions that shift the economic system from being life blind, extractive, destructive to regenerative. And that's a philosophy that we incorporated into our bioregional plan, which is called Buen Vivir, the idea of well-being, collective well-being. It's an indigenous philosophy that well-being is the way of nature. Nature collaborates to create more conditions for more life to flourish. And that really, we need to create a well-being economy, regenerative economy. That economy needs to be life-affirming. And so we're there working it out, not easy. The funding hasn't arrived in the scale we expected. We're still working to scale capacity of Indigenous people, leadership work, and I can share more in the next round. But thank you for that question.
Sounds like there's a lot of lessons there that I think others need to be internalizing and using the decolonizing of perspectives and the listening and the shifting of the way things are done and the way things are even understood. I have a follow-up question for you. So in the context of participatory philanthropy, what do you think are some concrete examples of how the global north could better integrate Indigenous-led solutions into climate action and conservation work?
What I've noticed in 30 plus years of working in the Amazon is that philanthropy, especially for front lines and communities, is very much hesitant. There's not trust. And often projects are designed short-term, one-year grants, very project specific. And what we see working actually in the field, what's actually helping these, like the Sacred Headwaters Alliance and our approach has been, we need long-term funding, general support. I'm sure a lot of you are studying this as a science, so you can tell me what you think works. But from what I've learned is that, general support, investing in leadership, because they're leaders that make the change. One of the constraints for Indigenous peoples is that they have pluralistic, democratic organizations. They have distributed leadership. Every 3 or 4 years are all new leaders. So when you're looking at philanthropy, one of the things that you need for philanthropy is long-term relationships, knowing this donor, knowing that philanthropist, knowing this network. When Indigenous peoples are at a disadvantage because they're doing shared, distributed leadership. So we need to figure out how to embrace networks, how to embrace training and leadership development, how to be ready to meet the new leaders, even if we don't know them, and how to create basically long-term strategies for self-sufficiency so that we are not just creating short-term, like an infusion of $1 million for 1 year and then no plan for long-term sustainability. So those are some of the things. And I think about money in the same way I would think about water, that it needs to flow distributedly through the landscape without creating deluges or droughts, or without being violent, by being trickling and being distributed the way nature distributes water. So we really do need to create more dialogues. I mean, there was a commitment by donors in 2021 at COP in Glasgow for $1.7 billion directly to support Indigenous frontline communities in their climate solutions. Well, what we know is that less than 8% of that money has reached the front line, the communities. And that part of the problem is that donors are feeling, as I said, hesitant and a lack of long-term trust. And so, in our world, in the NGO world, in other sectors, many organizations have failed. They've misused funds. They've, experimented and learned from those failures. Why can we not also afford Indigenous peoples the trust and the long-term investment to build them, the sector in helping build capacity of the leaders that are emergent?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, Shatosa. Yash, I wanted to ask, your organization works to enable public, private, and social partnership to create lasting solutions to environmental and economic challenges. What role do you think those partnerships play, particularly when it comes to funding and implementing on-the-ground initiatives?
So thanks for that question, Ash. So, we have been always working from the lens of demand-driven, community-led local solutions. So everything what we do is centered around the people. And our role as Pixara Global is to make that demand in relationship to the demand of the businesses mostly that we work with, that are material to their businesses, but also make them responsible for what they as businesses should be looking at in terms of collaborations and partnership with communities. So just to give you one example, how our partnerships look like is the way we see a skill gap in an organization or in a social impact business that needs that skill, which they either can't access, they didn't have access, they don't have access to, or they can't afford that skill. So we bridge that gap for even those businesses to learn the value of the skills that they bring to the impact, but also make them feel connected to the part of bigger problem. So that's how we make the people with money that cares about these causes, one, have a first-hand experience of the impact on the communities. That's how the relationship building process starts. And I think with that journey, we then co-create with them on design demand-driven projects that are community-centered. So just to give you an example of project that would explain you the relationship, the symbiosis that we do is around, say, for example, in Northeast India, the big problem that even the world faces is around how do you manage the lives and livelihoods of the frontline workers who are indigenous to the communities, and they are working and impacting with the waste of the cities and the communities. So we bring the best of the skill sets as well as resources from the private sector, and then design and systemic program that improves the lives and livelihoods in a way that disrupts the siloed approach of systems work, non-systems approach of working. So that's how we bring this relationship, understanding, learning, dialogue, skill exchange, as well as then the relationship on bringing in the philanthropic capital or the investment kind of capital in these communities. That journey starts. So basically for us, this is a journey. And then how do we, co-create with these partners from public and private sectors to design these systemic solutions with our understanding and ability to bring a common grammar on the table.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And so I have a follow-up question for you. PepsiCo India and Pixara Global have partnered on a transformative waste management initiative. How does that collaboration aim to integrate waste collectors into formal waste management systems? And what measurable progress do you hope to achieve in terms of recycling and waste diversion?
Absolutely. So Northeast India has a very a dense populated region in our country. So the climate, the problem of waste is very, very deep because the demographic is such that the population is huge, but the diversing out of waste is not at all there because of its geographical positioning. So that's where Pixara Global with PepsiCo Foundation in US and PepsiCo Business in India designed a program that, one, how do we co-create a community asset that is owned, managed, and led by community, that builds their skills, that invests in the infrastructure they need to deal with the waste challenges. So that's how we designed the first climate cooperative that is owned by the communities where we are operating in Guwahati right now. And the objective of the climate cooperative is to invest in education, entrepreneurship, and environmental needs of the state of Assam, where we are working right now. And the capital is Guwahati because it's the most dense part of the region. So what we do in this relationship is that by bringing this cooperative in picture, which becomes an asset for the community that attracts all the kind of philanthropic support, all the kinds of other CSR support, and then we build the capacity of community to run this cooperative. So in terms of our success, just last evening, we launched the first formal cooperative with the endorsement of the Minister of Cooperation and the entire Department of Climate in the state, which is the first climate co-op addressing the climate challenges, especially from the waste management lens, but then looking it at whole that invest in education, because in not only in India, but the education and making people aware of the depth of the challenge and the urgency of challenge is most important. So we are very much deeply focused on building the awareness through education program, right from schools, but also in the communities and as well as at the system level. So that's how we start the process, and then we build local entrepreneurs, build local leaders from the communities who can then own and lead the climate solutions at the community level, but then we can expand it across the region of 8 states of Northeast India.
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. John, I'd like to ask you a question. The Green Generation Initiative introduced eco projects in schools and on farmlands, combining hands-on environmental education with practical solutions like tree nurseries and waste management. What have been some of the most effective outcomes from these projects in terms of student engagement and local environmental stewardship?
Okay, thank you for that. I would first say that we pride ourselves in having reached out to around, so far we have around 312 schools that we have established fruit orchards and green zones. And in these zones, when we are doing the fruit orchards, we mainly work with grafted seedlings to ensure that the seedlings take a shorter time to grow in the schools. And when we are establishing the green zones in the schools, we ensure that we teach the students on the best practices to handle the seedlings from the planting to the tree nursery management to ensure that they grow to the optimum level. And the successes that we have seen in some of these projects is that first of all, it brings a whole balance of the socio-economical thing, in that when you do fruits in the schools, the schools can sell them as a source of income. And number two, you are also doing carbon sequestration, because they are still if you do like avocados in the schools, they are still contributing to carbon sequestration in the environment. So you ensure that you are developing the socio-ecological thing of the school, and you're also ensuring that you are bringing sustainability in the school, because these people are motivated to conserve the fruits. They are motivated to conserve the green zones, because they are sure there is food here, there is money here. So we are empowered economically, and nature is also happy, because nature is also conserved. We have carbon sequestration, and we have seen a reach out of around 312 of the schools in the communities. We have seen them more motivated to be involved in landscape restoration than before, because we have like, I can give you an example of a project we have recently carrying out in a forest called Karima Forest in Kenya, where we first involved the community by first asking them questions on the best way to conserve that forest. It's a community forest. And when we had engaged them on that level, we went ahead and donated fruit seedlings to them to go plant in their homes and have them planted before we establish a long-term plan on how to conserve that community forest. And through that, we can see that the community are happy, and they look at this project, nature-based solution, in an aspect of we are part of the solution, because we are involved in the whole process from the consultation. We don't trickle down the solutions. We let the solution be locally based. So that is what we pride in, and we have seen also a mindset shift in the young generation, in that these students, especially the schools that we go to, we have a program called Adopt a School. So, and when we adopt a school, we also encourage the students to adopt a tree. In that, when we come plant the seedlings at your school, we put individual responsibility on each and every seedlings that is planted in that school. And through that, when we come back for monitoring and evaluation, the students are very excited. While you hear them saying, "This is my tree, it is growing well, I have been watering it, I have been looking after it, I fenced it." They go to an extent of even fencing and taking care of them. And through that, we can see that we are raising, as the name suggestion, green generation initiative. We are raising a generation of young people who are environmentally conscious of what they are supposed to do, and they are not just part of the environment, they are part of the solution. And we are also bringing nature-based solution. Another thing that we love encouraging in our young generation on waste management is there are places we go and we see that the bottles, the bottles that are polythene, that are non-biodegradable, we see them use them in drip irrigation. They put water and they put beside the tree and they use them for drip irrigation. So they use those products to ensure that they don't waste the environment, and at the same time they are doing drip irrigation. For the places where the seedlings have polypods, we see them reusing those polypods, because we understand that plastic can be very messy to the environment. They take quite a lot of years almost before they can rot. So we have seen that success, and we have engaged a lot of schools, more than 312. We have engaged more than 180,000 members in the community in these landscape restoration projects across schools, across forests, across riverbanks, and everywhere we go. And we pride ourselves in what we do, and it's something that we are so happy to engage in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for telling us about it. I have another follow-up question, actually. Much of the work at your organization focuses on youth, right, and movement building for emerging young climate activists in and beyond Kenya. How can young climate leaders in Africa be better supported in developing and scaling climate-smart solutions? And what role do they play in shaping climate policy and advocacy, do you think?
There are several things that need to be involved there. In the past, we have been involved in youth-led climate actions. In 2023, we were involved in the setup of the first African Youth Climate Assembly that was done in Kenya. And it started and it involved the young people across Africa. And there was an agreement that was signed in the presence of the outgoing AUC chairperson, President Faki. And currently, what can be done to the young generation in Africa? Number one, they need to be involved not only in the end product of the policies that are designed, but they need to be involved at the aspect of where the policies are made. What do I mean by that? Every aspect of the African Union that involves climate policies, UNFCCC, and every aspect that is involved in policy development needs to engage the young generation. Number two, there needs to be a lot of capacity building for the young generation, because you understand that some of them don't understand what they're involved in. They don't understand aspects to do with climate, to do with the restoration, to do with nature, to do with the rivers, to do with waters. So there needs to be a lot of investment and donor funding in the aspect of capacity building for them to understand what they are doing, so that they can offer solutions in the right way. The other aspect is that they need to be mentored in the right way. They need to be, they need to sit in those tables, the African Union tables that decide on policy, the UNFCCC tables that decide on policy, and in their countries, they need to be involved in the activities that are done on policy, so that they can involve this decision. Because we understand, as far as we are having a cultural shift, we need to understand that there is knowledge that this generation has, that if it is not properly mentored and if it is not given a platform, we will lose an entire generation because of ignoring some of the solutions that we have. You can all agree with me that a lot of innovations that we are having towards these issues to do with plastic recycling, these issues to do with technology, are sourced and are outsourced from the young generation. So that is something that needs to be done. There needs to be a lot, the funding needs to trickle down to the young generation. There needs to be trust. As Atosha was speaking, I remembered something that is also a challenge in Africa, that you find there are a lot of donor funding, but less than 20% of that money actually reaches to the actual people on the ground. So you'll find that there are a lot of commitments which are not honored, and it's something, if it's properly done, because these things, a lot of these solutions that the young generation have are scientifically proven, and it's something you can look at it, you can say this is the problem and this is the solution, and they are offering actual solutions for the problem that we are encountering, not only as Africa but as a group.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John, for sharing that with us. And actually, I want to make sure we have time for the Q&A session. We're already getting some really great questions coming in from the audience. So if any others who are here want to drop questions into the Q&A box, we'd love to have you do so. It looks like our first question is from Kimberly Myers-Hewlett. Hello. I'd love to learn, she says, I'd love to learn more about how these panelists are working with philanthropy. Are they, and I think by that she means philanthropic donors, foundations. Are they finding ways to connect the donors with the communities? So I don't know who wants to take
Well,
that.
I can jump in just briefly. We often do attend events. There's been a collective that's working on this idea of the scaling funding to Indigenous peoples, for example, that came out of Glasgow that I mentioned. So we've attended those gatherings, which are a lot of dialogues. There are networks like the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples who've brought together donors and Indigenous peoples to have dialogues. There are alliances of Indigenous peoples around the world to try to get more attention from funders and platforms that are trying to get that. And my personal favorite is you know, either when we have Indigenous peoples on delegations to COPs or to events around New York Climate Week or something like that, or when donors want to come and actually visit, do site visits, I find those moments of like person-to-person connection really have a help to open up trust, open up understanding, mutual understanding, and in some ways when they come to the rainforest and experience for themselves, you know, that's when you truly find long-term allyship. So that's just some of the ways we're engaging donors.
Satosa. Yeah, sure. John, I want a second if you wanted to jump in, otherwise.
I can quickly respond to that. So again, like as Pixar Global, we have been predominantly working with the private sector and the large institutional investors. But now we realize that with this uncertainty that is rising in the world, we really see the role of philanthropic families, philanthropic organizations to be leading with the examples of what the real community needs are. So I think we have just started with one of a very innovative approach of bringing 15 major climate action organizations together as a part of collaborative to have a collective voice and a collective narrative for the philanthropists. And we have been now sharing with them. And this collaborative is called Systemic Climate Action Collaborative. So these are all different organizations representing almost every country in the world with the work and 250 years of combined execution expertise on ground in the communities. And that's our way of getting into the world of philanthropy. And then we would now love to find ways to bring these organizations on grounds and get them the first-hand experience the way we have been able to get the top leadership of private sector on ground and get not only their experience but their expertise to these communities. So I think that's a way that we are trying to design, and we would love to get more support of how do we do this skill-based volunteering project for these philanthropic organization leaders to get hands-on understanding of the systemic change that we love them to be part of in long-term capacity. So that's something that, again, we would also love to learn from you guys how best we can do that from some of our experience in the private sector.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is from, I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly, but Leah Golder. Leah asks, hello, do you talk to governments or big industries? And if so, do you feel that some of them are ready to change their general patterns and view? And then she has in parentheses, short-term profit oriented, so maybe away from that. And I know, Yash, you've certainly partnered with some big industry partners, so you among
So
others.
I can quickly touch that upon, and that's a very interesting question. So thank you for that question, because that's the whole reason Pixara Global wanted to bring its expertise of what we have been able to learn in our work with these tri-sector partners to enable the systemic action. So again, individually, no, they are not interested for long-term things, but I think that's where our role comes, is to really get them see the potential that are interest to their government agenda as well as to their material needs. So I can give you and share an example of one of the corporate foundations that we have worked with has supported our work in rural India to improve the lives and livelihoods and resilience of smallholder farmers consistently for 10 years. So they do here, but it's the way you get them involved. So I think it's equally our responsibility. And just in the case of government, again, I can share the example from previous evening in Guwahati right now, where I am, is the entire ministry stood on their feet to appreciate and support this first climate cooperative of Northeast India. So I think there is definitely the appetite in them, but again, a lot of storytelling, a lot of sensitization, and a lot of groundwork needs to happen for them to be able to come out of their silos, break those the biases that they have in mind, and give them an opportunity and a platform to able to get them meet their interest along with the larger systemic interest of the community. So yeah.
Maybe I can jump in as
Not
well.
easy. It's not
Thank you,
easy.
Yash. Yes, I think there's really the in the private sector, what we've seen is leaders and laggards. You know, those who have really embraced the climate crisis and all of the global quality crises and are putting their social responsibility in the center, or at least the triple bottom line, and taking actions. Of course, that takes time. Nothing's going to transform overnight. But then we also see the laggards, which are many of the industry actors that we deal with are some of the worst. They're the oil companies, mining companies from Belarus and from China, and from with no human rights and no free prior informed consent policies. Within those industries, I think it's been difficult to get them to change, but we do engage them through shareholder actions, through going to meet with their investors. We've targeted the organization, one of the organizations I'm part of, Amazon Watch, has done a lot of work engaging major pension funds, engaging big financial institutions, both public and private, to basically divest or transition their investments from extractive and destructive to regenerative. And so there's some great successes. You know, 6 European banks committed not to finance more new fossil fuel projects in the Amazon, and there's many other types of commitments. But government is where I think we can basically see, just from what's happening today in the U.S. administration, it all comes down to who's in power. And that's why we need also strategies that promote grassroots action at the bioregional level, so we're not so dependent on government action. But of course, we have champions, for example, now in Brazil and Colombia, who really pushed the agenda of supporting indigenous-led conservation. Colombia recognized indigenous peoples as authorities in their territories, environmental authorities, and governors of their territories in some of their recent decisions. Of course, Brazil has named huge, activists in charge of indigenous peoples ministries, and put people like Marina Silva, who's a champion, one of the most amazing activists in the Ministry of Environment. And so those are the moments we have, those little short windows when we have supportive governments that we need to really push for policy change. And but yeah, it's it's so important that to recognize that our democracy is captured by corporate and political interests, and it's really difficult to what we're dealing with right now in the US. Of course, the USAID was shut down. That's affecting many of our organizations in the forest who depended on long-term government aid. We have not so far received support from governments. We've mostly been getting support from individuals and institutions and private sector actors, but many of the projects in the Amazon were funded by USAID are now, completely stopped. And so it is so important to develop strategies that make us immune to these political, shifts in the world, which are moving towards more fascism, more conservative, more, corporate capture of our democracies. So, yeah, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question with quick responses from our panelists before, sadly, we have to close because I feel like I could keep talking with you all for quite a bit longer. But McKinley asks a question. She says, it's no secret that the current US administration is not I don't know if anyone can hear, but my children are outside the door screaming. So you might not be able to hear because I feel like Zoom is good with that. But the question is, it's no secret that the current US administration is not exactly worried about the climate crisis. With the pause of USAID funding, to play off of what you were saying just now, Atossa, and other federal grants, how does the current political situation in the US impact your work, if at all? So Atossa, I know you already spoke to this a little bit. So if you guys, maybe if the others could respond to this, and then Atossa, you talked about adapting strategies, and I'd love to hear about those. For our closing, and we only have 3 minutes left, so.
I think you were going to go first, John, and then I'll close it. Thank you.
I would say that first of all, that if you look at the dynamics of the global north and the global south, and the dynamics of the US, they directly, in one way or the other, affect it trickles down to Africa, to Kenya, and many of the regions that we are in, because some of the organizations that we work with or who support some of the projects that we do are based in the US. And it's a trickle-down kind of effect in a way that you see that previously there are some things that have been signed, like the UNFCCC. It has been signed, and it binds all countries together to comply and to contribute according to how much they pollute. And if we have some of these countries which are contributing more to the crisis that we have in our world, withdrawing or not funding whatever they are supposed to fund, you'll find that the recipients are the African nations, Kenya or beyond. So it is a trickle-down kind of effect in that if we have the greatest contributors of some of these pollutions withdrawing from the donorship funding that they are supposed to contribute, it will greatly affect somebody who maybe probably did not contribute as much as to the population, to the pollution as them. So it is a trickle effect kind of thing. And I would say for a fact, it affects even the country we are based in, like Kenya, because a lot of these things to do with HIV, funding the medicine and all of them, you find that even employees here, a lot of them have been sacked, and some of them have been given leaves, mandatory leaves. It's a trickle kind of thing, and it affects our country. And the downside of that is that going forward as a group, we have to look at a place where we focus more on philanthropies from the private sector, working with local banks, working with local organizations that are not only, they just want to do ESG, they just want to do CSR, not those kind of organizations, but organizations who are concerned about where their ESG programs go, where their CSR funding go, because those are the kind of organizations that will not only throw away money, because we may have organizations just throw away money, but we have organizations that contribute towards the solution, not just doing it for the sake. So it affects because the global north is the greatest contributor of some of this pollution. And when the global south is left out and some of them withdraws from some of this commitment which binds them and refuses to fund them, it comes down because, and then as I had said previously, nature is very unforgiving. If we have a global, if we have an environmental crisis, the heat waves will not recognize the global north or the global south. The drought will not recognize the global north or the global south. It affects all of us because if the heat waves increases, it affects all of us. So it's something that affects us, and we as an organization, we are looking forward to working with local organizations like the Water Fund, which is interested in conserving some of the funding some of the projects that we are doing. Coca-Cola in Kenya is interested because the government inclines them to do programs where they get some of the raw materials in there to develop their products. So it's something we are looking forward to, and it is something that is affecting the ecosystem in a big way.
Thank you, John. And I know we're 1 minute over time, but if Atosa or Yash just have like a 30-second closing remark or comment, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I just love to share a couple links with the panel, with the audience about the work we're doing, including this idea of bioregional planning and bioregional emergent ways that we can basically do collective action that has impact for the long term. We have a program called the Jaguar Token. It's a pilot program where people are supporting communities' biocultural stewardship. And it's an example that we can scale to other parts of the world. It's a key year for the Amazon, 2025. The COP will be in Berlin. It's a key moment for coming together for our planet. And so I just invite us to keep in touch and let me know how I can be a resource for this community. I'm grateful to be on with you all. Thank you.
Yash?
Thanks, Atosa. And I think this is a perfect gathering and a perfect stage for organizations like John's work and Atosa's work and many other in the world. I think this is an important conversation and an important platform that gives not only just a voice and platform for the on-ground action, but I think this also informs a lot of inputs to the philanthropic community of how do we bridge the gap between the real organization doing some impactful, scalable work and how do we bridge the gap. So I think that's exactly what this particular platform, and thank you, Ash, for creating this opportunity for us and Indiana University and Lilly School of Philanthropy. We really appreciate this opportunity and we look forward for more engagements, collaborations, and any kind of support that we as I would say action people bring on the table. But then, how can we bring in action and the academia together to inform the decisions of the people who can invest and the philanthropic investments in the impact work. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you again to all of our speakers. As we close up, I find myself returning to that saying about interesting times. Yes, these times are quite challenging, but they're also, as you've shown us today, rich with possibility. Our speakers demonstrated that even in the face of these serious challenges, dedicated people working together can create meaningful change. And it reminds us that interesting times aren't just something that happen to us. There are times we can actively shape. So thank you again to our remarkable speakers for sharing your experiences and your insights. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. There'll be a recording that will be available to attendees. And let's carry these stories of change and possibility forward as we continue this work together. Thank you.